Welcome to the leading podcast for long-term weight management. Subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss an episode. You can connect with Jenny on all social media channels. You can also sign up to the newsletter to receive frequent content and tips for weight loss success.
Hey guys, welcome to the latest episode of the Power Over Food podcast. I am your host, Jenny McDonald, and I hope you're having a great week. I hope life is treating you well, and I hope you are settling in to 2023. Hey, crazy. So today I'm incredibly excited to have a guest with me. This lady and I have connected over social media through Instagram, and as with all of my guests, this lady is an expert in her field, and like me, she wouldn't be here if she wasn't like me, but strongly believes in helping others find peace with food and moving away from the dieting cycle, the body shame, and everything that is entangled in that world. So Dr. Miller works in the field of mental health, and she specializes in eating disorders and runs her own elite binge eating recovering program, which sounds incredible, by the way, guys. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Dr. Marieanne Miller.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Yay, welcome back. Oh, it is so lovely to have you here. And I just know that what we're going to talk about today and you sharing your story and your advice is going to so help my listeners. So thank you very much for agreeing to being on the show.
My pleasure. I'm so passionate about this, like you. So the more we can get the message out, the better.
Absolutely. And do you know what you're saying? That it's great, isn't it, to see our community growing and that shift around diets. It's bubbling away. I think, give it another few years and the story will unfold so much more. It is great to see so many of us champion this freedom with food. So I always like to start off with my guests just by inviting you to share your story. Tell us a little bit about you, your journey, and how you have come to do what you do, really.
Thank you. It has been a long journey, and it includes a professional development component and then a personal development component. And I'll talk about the professional development first. I moved to San Diego, California. It's south of Los Angeles in 2006. And I was a professor at a university out here. And I started a part-time private therapy practice where I was working with people who had chronic pain. And I ran a chronic pain support group and did all of those things to support people with chronic pain. And I found that a lot of people with chronic pain had disordered eating symptoms. So at the university, they taught a class on eating disorders one summer. And so I sat in on the class and I read all the textbooks and I absolutely fell in love with it. And thankfully, I'm in San Diego, where the university has one of the top tier eating disorder programs in the country, if not the world. And they put out a lot of research. And so they offer weekly trainings for practitioners and plus conferences. And so I just started attending those trainings regularly, went to all the conferences, read until I felt that I was trained enough to start working with people who had eating disorders. And when I began, I just fell in love with it so much. I mean, it truly is my calling and my passion. So that's the professional branch. And then the personal branch is that I myself am recovered from an eating disorder. And I didn't come out to the world as having an eating disorder history until last spring in 2022. And when I did that, it was very intentional because I did that with the intention to tell people that, yes, you can recover, because I think that there are a lot of myths in mental health, myths in the world, that once you have an eating disorder, you'll always have an eating disorder. And that's categorically untrue, is that you can recover from eating disorders. And I know because I've lived it. And not only have I lived it, I've watched and walked with hundreds of people who have recovered completely. And the key is getting the right treatment and the right help, from a qualified professional. My eating disorder began when I was in elementary school and with dieting. It began with the dieting, as you can probably relate to, or you've heard a lot of stories, is that dieting begins really young. And then in middle school, looking back, I moved into a more restrictive phase, to where I was not eating very many calories a day, and my period stopped. The interesting thing is that it was back in the 80s. And so at that time, there was not a lot known about eating disorders. And so I didn't look like I had an eating disorder because my body wasn't small enough or whatever. And so nobody had no idea. They were just like, oh, it's great, she's losing weight, and I got a lot of praise from that. And that went on for a couple of years. And then eventually, when I got my driver's license, and on my 16th birthday, I remember getting my driver's license and getting with a friend and going out and getting frozen yogurt. That's like the first thing that we did. And so frozen yogurt was really big, back in the late 80s and early 90s. When I got my driver's license, I had the freedom to go out and buy a lot of these foods that weren't allowed in the household in which I grew up. It was a very food restrictive household that was very entrenched in diet culture. And I can expand on that later, what that means. And so after I got my license, I was like, yay, this is awesome. I can go get whatever food I got. And then, so what that did is that led to a lot of binging, because I was trying to cope with challenging situations at home. And then I would binge for a while, and then I would restrict for a while, and then I would binge and restrict. And that binge restrict cycle lasted all the way to university, where I was feeling pretty miserable, depressed in my sophomore year, my second year at university. And they had a guest speaker come to campus who had written a book on her own eating disorder recovery. And when she got up and spoke and was describing her situation, I sat back and thought, oh, I think I have an eating disorder. And so I started reaching out for help at that time. But unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of help. Again, this was early 90s, and people thought eating disorders were two categories, anorexia, bulimia, and it looked very narrow in terms of the characteristics or symptoms of them. And so what I found over time is that when I would see therapists or go to support groups, a lot of people weren't sure what category to put me in, and that kind of felt invalidating, and then I questioned myself, do I really have an eating disorder? I don't know. And then what happened is that I graduated from university. It was before I went to graduate school. I wasn't sure what to do, and I went through this big transition. And I was feeling so anxious. So I said, oh, okay, I'm going to get healthy. And getting healthy meant over exercising, which is a huge eating disorder symptom. So I would restrict, I would occasionally do like little binges, and then I would over exercise. And I actually spent a year at that time living in Siberia, working with the church, doing pastoral counseling, which is when, you just counsel people from a spiritual perspective. So you're not a qualified therapist or anything. During that time, I vividly remember I was in Siberia. I would wake up in the morning. I would do an exercise video, and then I would walk for miles and miles in the snow uphill and because I was just really obsessed with that, and it was compulsive, and I felt so anxious and was thinking about food, eating, and body image all the time during that year. And that continued when I came home and I went to graduate school, through my master's program, through my PhD program, until I graduated from my PhD program. And then a month afterward, I injured my back because of the over-exercising. And then I couldn't exercise anymore. And so when that happened, my main coping mechanism for uncomfortable emotions was taken away. And so I shifted full on into the binging. That was the depths of probably my misery, because not only was I in pain, I was also binging and gaining weight and just feeling so awful and uncomfortable about myself. And I mean, I was bedridden at one point for like 2.5 months after a surgery that didn't go well. And so thankfully, eventually my pain got better a little bit, enough to where I could apply for the university program to be a full-time professor out in California. And so we were in Texas at the time. That's where I did my graduate school. So we moved from Texas to California, and I was able to find a therapist who really specialized in eating disorders, like had an extensive 25 plus year experience with working in eating disorder treatment centers and having a private practice aimed toward that. And it wasn't until I really saw the right person, where I started to recover. And so I saw her for several years. I went to a support group for many years. And it was that time where I was seeing chronic pain and chronic illness clients in my private practice. And then I remember vividly talking to my therapist when I was considering working with eating disorder clients. And I was like, am I ready? I feel like I can't treat people with eating disorders because of my eating disorder history. And she said, well, the fact that you've lived it means that you have so much more to give in the therapy room. And I said, okay. And I made sure I was totally trained and, really, got to the point where my recovery was solid. And then I began working with people and haven't looked back, because when I've done it and when I continue to do it, and I've been doing it full time, or not full time, I've been doing it for 11 years, full time for 5 years, because I left the university in 2018. I was able to just feel like this sort of relief, like this is my purpose, like this is my calling, is to help people. And so do I hate that I went through an eating disorder in my life? Absolutely. Do I think it's unfair? Yeah, it wasn't my choice. And I can explain why it wasn't my choice in a little bit if you'd like. Did good come out of it? 1000%, because I've been able to connect and help people. And I mean, I don't disclose with my clients that I have an eating disorder, because the focus needs to be on them. Some of them do follow me on social media and they figured it out, but it's not like we talk about it, because the focus needs to be on their issues. But on this like deep, empathetic, compassionate level, I can really connect with them in many ways. And it's like the love of my life to do this. Well, my husband's the love of my life, but to do this as well is also the love of my life. So
it's funny. I totally feel the same about my relationship with food. Like you, I got into the dieting cycle around 11 years old. And I remember going to a slimming club and looking back, I can't believe they accepted me into the slimming club. It's absolutely insane. But now, where I am now, I totally believe I needed to live that path. I needed to experience what I've experienced, because that has been my purpose. That has been my journey. And that is what I do best, if you like, because I totally get it. And that's exactly the same for you. You know where your clients are coming from. So it's all so relatable, and you know what's helped you the best. Yes, you've had the training, but you also know what's worked for you and how that feels to implement those tools.
Yes, it's like we have the same brain because we know what it's like. We know what recovery feels like. And it's so amazing and freeing. I'm not thinking about food, eating, and body image 90% of the time.
Yeah.
I think about it like less than 10% of the time, sometimes less than 5% of the time. I just don't think about it. I have other fabulous things to think about in my life. And I want other people to feel that and experience that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My next question is, and you might want to tie in some more of your journey with this, whatever feels more comfortable for you, but what is so powerful about what you do now with your clients?
I have a unique way of really tuning in to the struggle and challenge of people who are binge eating in particular, because I work with a lot of binge eating, and get them to transform their relationship with food by giving them coping skills and to help them change the narrative, as you mentioned, so that they can redefine how they relate with food and with their bodies.
Which is truly life-changing, isn't it? It's when you're on the other side of that circle, it's such a game changer. And I just, like you want to tell everybody, it's like, there is another answer, because it's so freeing, it's so liberating, it's so, like you say, you can go and live your life not obsessing and thinking about it all the time. It's, yeah.
It's life changing, and in some cases it's life saving.
Absolutely. Yeah. So do you have tips that you would, maybe you talk about these on Instagram, but that you're happy to share with the listeners that they can immediately take away and implement if they are struggling with binge eating? What would be your top tips for them to get started with their recovery?
So tip number one is eat regularly throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called mechanical eating. So mechanical eating is the foundation of recovery. If you're binge eating, that means there's some restriction going on. So you want to change that so you are eating regularly throughout the day. So the first thing they can do to start doing that is to eat breakfast within an hour of waking. That is the first tip that I tell my clients. And my clients may say, oh, I haven't eaten breakfast in 30 years. Why should I start now? Or I'm never hungry. And then I say to them, well, do it anyway, even if you're not hungry, because over time, you'll teach your body to expect food in the morning, and eventually you will be hungry in the morning. Eating breakfast boosts your energy, it boosts your mood, it gives you more headspace to be able to handle the stressors of the day. It regulates blood sugar, it boosts your metabolism. There's no argument against eating breakfast. So eat breakfast and then eat regularly throughout the day. Like we usually teach the rule of threes: eat every 3 hours, eat 3 meals, eat 3 snacks. And that may feel like, oh, that's a lot for people. And try to have 3 components to what you eat. Typically like a carb, a protein, and a fat, because that will help with the satiety. Now, I don't begin people with that because that feels so much, that feels very overwhelming for them. So I would say, all I want you to worry about is eating breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
And do that for a couple of weeks. And then maybe like add a snack, like mid-morning or mid-afternoon. And then maybe after that, make sure that your breakfast has 3 different components, like an egg, an avocado, and a toast, or something like that, or yogurt, granola, and berries, like 3 components where you have a carb, a protein, and a fat. And throwing a produce in there is also helpful too, but you don't have to. Sometimes it's easy to remember carb, protein, fat as CPIF, CPF, CPIF. So eating breakfast, rule of 3s, 3 meals a day, 3 snacks eventually, and then 3 components, carb, protein, and a fat at least. And you can throw a produce in there. Those are the things to begin with. And then the second big tip, I would say, is start reaching out for support. And that support can be a support group, eating disorder support group. It can be online, a Facebook group. I run a Facebook group called Redefining Relationships with Food and with Your Body that you can join if you struggle with these issues. I'd love to have you in there. Take the first step by reaching out. If you feel comfortable, you can work with an eating disorder therapist, or you can work with a binge eating coach like what I do, or sign up for a program, that might be helpful for you. But at least take one actionable step, even if it doesn't feel like a big step. Maybe just join a Facebook group or go to my website and look at my blogs. I've been doing blogs for years where I have so much information about eating disorders. So that's the first step that you can do.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And do you know what? I totally agree with both of those points. Our body likes to know food's coming. And when we've been in that dieting cycle for so long, it never knows when it's going to be starved, when it's going to have to wait all day for fuel because you overate the night before. So you're thinking, oh, I can't eat today. And it just likes to know, right, I'm getting food on a regular basis. Okay, now I can settle down. And I think there's a huge learning process to go through, isn't there, when you get to eat regularly. I mean, this was a massive light bulb moment for me. And I realized that even though I'd regulated my body weight, and I'm not saying it's about weight, but for me, I'd got to a point where I'd regulated my body weight and I thought I was doing really, really well. And I think to the outside world, it was like, well, you're all right. People used to say, oh, you've done well. And actually what was happening was I was still in this cycle without even realizing it. I was restricting my food all week so that I could really indulge at the weekend. And it was like, when I realized, I was like, oh my God, wow, how did I not spot that I was still doing this? I was, mind blown. And the revelation that when you don't restrict your food in the week, you don't overeat at the weekend. You don't want to binge at the weekend because it's like, well, I don't need to. If I wanted a cake on Wednesday afternoon, I had the piece of cake. I didn't have to wait till Saturday. So therefore, it's not like when Saturday comes around, I'm eating the cake, I'm eating the crisps, I'm eating the processed foods, it's like I can have whatever I want when I want. And also when you don't restrict in that way, it doesn't become a big deal. It's like, oh yeah, that's there. And if I want it, I can have it. So all of a sudden it's like, do I want it? Maybe, actually, maybe not. And you're just free to make those choices. It literally is. I know I keep using the word incredible, but it's incredible because it's such a shift. And the second thing you said was about support. And this is key. I can't stress to the listeners how key this is, because I think, again, when you've had that body shame and that difficulty with food, the mentality is I should be able to sort this. I should be able to do this. And a lot of my ladies say to me, they come to me and they say, I've got this huge responsibility, this job I have, it's, I'm a high flyer or I run my own business. Yet I can't crack this one thing. It's like, I should be able to do this. And it's like, whoa. Who said you should be able to do this? We're not taught these skills. And quite often we're taught completely the opposite. We're brought up in this diet culture society. We're brought up looking at the media saying, this is what you need to look like. This is what a perfect life is. And we're just trying to make sense of the world and do what we think is right from what information we're consuming. And we're just doing our best. It's not surprising that we get to this point where we literally don't know what we're meant to be doing with food. So for anyone that's thinking that, oh, I should be able to work this out, please, you are not alone. It is okay to ask for support. In fact, it's really, really crucial that you ask for support, that you reach out, and be wary of where that support's coming from as well, because I know I spent many years, and again, my friends are great, but your friends are not really the people that might understand this issue. They're not qualified to deal with this issue. They've not got the tools to help you change this. And you know, I always think that relationships are a really tricky thing, aren't they? And you don't want to be putting that pressure and that strain on a relationship. You want to be finding what is going to work for you and what is going to fast track you to that recovery, rather than damage friendships or make tension and things fraught between you and a loved one or one of your friends. So, yeah.
Yes, it sounds like a lot of the women you talk to are of the same mindset and in the same place as many of my clients, as they say, I'm killing it in every area of my life. Like, these are really high performing people. And why can't I get it together around food, eating, and body image? And I say to them, well, it's not about willpower, that eating disorders are actually brain disorders, that they have found that people who have eating disorders have areas of the brain that aren't working as efficiently and as effectively compared to people without eating disorders. And there's also a biological predisposition to developing eating disorders.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that means is that researchers have conducted studies with identical twins. And when there's an eating disorder in one twin, there's an up to 82% chance that the eating disorder will be in the second twin. That means that you were likely hardwired to develop issues with eating, body image, and food, and that something in your life flipped that switch to make you develop it. For me, it was a very stressful family environment. That's what flipped the switch for me in elementary school, plus the heavy diet culture that existed in my family. For some people, it can be some type of trauma, bullying, or a big transition, a breakup, moving away to university, getting your first job, or a pileup of stressors that can flip the switch, and you can develop it. With treatment, though, with support and the right qualified support, you can recover. And that's what I think I really love about my Elite Binge Eating recovery method, is that it provides the support from me, virtual coach, who's a binge eating coach, and I am an eating disorder therapist in the state of California in the US. While I'm not practicing therapy, I'm coaching with this awesome set of skills as an eating disorder therapist. And then I provide community and a ton of resources through my integrative class and support group and things like that. Whether it's you work with me, whether you work with someone else, wherever you go, just go where people have specific training in eating disorders and that they have a lot of experience. Because if you don't, you might end up spinning your wheels and feeling frustrated, like you're not quite getting what you need. And so go to the people who are the experts.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question for you. What would you tell your younger self? If you could tell her one thing, what would it be?
I would tell her you are lovable, because I did not feel like I was lovable for a long time, decades. I really didn't grow into that. I started growing into it in my 20s, and then recovery has really helped with that too, because I didn't feel it because of my family situation. I often visualize myself giving a hug to my 8, 9-year-old self who was beginning to develop the eating disorder. I visualized my adult, almost 50-year-old self giving that 8, 9-year-old girl who was awesome. She was so awesome. Just giving her a hug and giving her love and say, you are so loved and you're lovable, and you're so deserving of that love.
Beautiful. And you mentioned that visualization, and it's something that I do with my clients and recommend to the listeners. Again, go within, just find that younger you, that version of you that you can see. Maybe she's at school, maybe she's in her first job or at uni, and or maybe it's only a few years ago, but just connect with her and ask her what she needs right now. Where is she right now? What does she need? What does she need from you, that more grown up, that adult version of you? And give her a hug, because it is quite often that if we've gone through this journey, we haven't felt that love, whether that's from ourselves, from people around us. So it's, connecting with that inner child is really, really important. Finally, obviously, I know you run lots of free classes like I do, free training. I'm going to put a shout out for people to look out for that from you. And I will also put your links in the show notes so people can go to the show notes. But what's the place you're most active on if people want to follow you? Is it Instagram? Is it your Facebook group? Where's the best place? Or if people want to contact you directly, is it email or social media?
I would say Instagram is the place where I'm the most active. It's at Dr Marieanne Miller. People can DM me on Instagram. They can always go to my website. As I said, there's a lot of resources on my website with my blog, and I have links to other podcasts and videos that I've guested on. They could sign up for my newsletter by going to my website at drmariannmiller.com. And reach out to me, please. I would love to hear from you.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you. It has been an absolute pleasure to chat to you. And I know my listeners, as I said before, will benefit from listening to your thoughts and sharing your tips. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And listeners, if you are thinking, wow, how can I connect with this wonderful human, then please do reach out. As I say, the links are in the show notes. So go there. If you're struggling to find the show notes, as I know some of these platforms can hide the show notes, then just drop me a message and I can always connect you. So that's it for today. Don't forget, as I say, reach out to both of us. I love hearing from you as well. There's nothing that makes my day more than when I get a message to say, I've just listened to the latest episode. I'm really implementing those tips. It was really helpful. So please do reach out. And finally, as I always say, there's thousands of people out there struggling with their relationship with food and their relationship with their self and their body. So the aim of this podcast is to get this message out there and to share it with as many people as possible. So please send a link to your friend, to someone you've met, someone who's struggling, and say, give this a listen. It's worth a listen. Share it on your socials, whatever, and help us spread the word that there is another way. You don't have to spend your life dieting. There is another way. Thank you again to Dr. Marieanne Miller, and I'm wishing
my pleasure.
It's been an absolute joy to speak to you, and I'm wishing everybody a great rest of your day, evening, whatever time you're listening to this. Stay safe, and I'll see you soon. Take care, guys. Bye.